listening to I Am Refocused Radio with your host, Shamaya Reed. This show is designed to inspire you to live your purpose and regain your focus. And now, here's your host, Shamaya Reed.
Hey, welcome to I Am Refocused Radio. We are here once again. Today, we have a special dual guest today. This morning, we have Damon DiMarco and Jim Martin. Damon DiMarco is the author of Tower Stories and Oral History of 9/11. And first and foremost, I just want to welcome you both to the show. Say how you doing this morning.
I'm well. How are you?
All is well, sir. And I'll start.
It's good to be with you.
Thank you, sir. I'll start with Damon. So this is a special piece of history. I mean, I had the honor to preview this, and I just feel like the stories are powerful in the way it sets. I feel like it's going to touch a lot of hearts. So what was it like working on this project?
Well, it was a labor of love. In the afternoon, right after 9/11 happened, I realized, Jeremiah, that I needed to get busy. My city had just been attacked. My nation had just been attacked. I just lost people, and I needed to get something done. Otherwise, I was going to lose it. So I made myself a project. I walked out of my apartment, and there was this policeman who had just been down at the pile, and he was covered with dust, and he was weeping. And I said, "Are you okay?" And he began to tell me everything that had happened. And I realized that somebody needed to be writing all this stuff down. And maybe you have some experience with oral history. Maybe you've read the work of Studs Terkel or the WPA slave narratives, where right out of people's mouths, they're talking about their experience. It's the most powerful form of oral communication I know, because it's like you could pick up this book and it's like you're talking to somebody from 100 years ago, like they're right there with you. And so I began to think, well, if it worked for those other projects, maybe it could work for this one. And so I started interviewing people. It took me 18 months, over 100 people, paramedics, firemen, policemen, rescue recovery workers, volunteers, survivors. It was my privilege to speak to every one of them and get their voices down so that history can remember how we served one another. That's the silver lining of 9/11. The tragedy is obvious, but the silver lining, got to look for it sometimes. How do we help one another? How do we become stronger by being together and by lifting each other up? And that's what the book is about.
And also, Reverend James Martin, we have you on as well. And you have a powerful part in the book where it starts with you being approached by a police officer, and he offers to take you to ground zero. Tell a little bit of a teaser for the audience what you share in that book.
Yeah, so on 9/11, I worked at a triage center. They were, expecting survivors. There were none. The next day, I worked at a family drop-in center for families looking for their relatives, their family members. And then, as you say, on September 13th, a police cruiser I was back at this triage center, and he said, "Do you want to go down there?" And I said, "Okay." And he said, "Get in." And he drove me past all this wreckage and right up to the site and just said, "Good luck." And I got out, and there I was kind of standing by myself while, there were hundreds, thousands of people, sometimes literally running around. And I thought, well, what can I do? Someone invited me to go to the morgue and to pray with the bodies, but I didn't think I could do that. So I thought, well, what could I do? I could work with the rescue workers and listen to them. So that was my work for the next couple of days and weeks, along with other Jesuit priests and brothers, was ministering to the rescue workers, to the firefighters, the doctors, the nurses, the EMTs, and just helping them deal with it and find their way through this trauma, this tragic event. So it was really ministering to the people who were doing the real kind of frontline work.
And Damon, you had some very powerful stories. I mean, one that came to mind right now is the office story. I won't go any further. I want people to read the book, but it was so detailed, and it's almost like you can feel a glimpse of what they were going through.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm glad you got that, because that was the intent, not to scare people, but to let them know the reality of what happened, and the reality of what happened only in that it informs the choices that people made over and over and over again to serve one another, despite these wacky circumstances, these tragic circumstances, these incredibly challenging circumstances. Every single person in this book, now that it's been 22 years, and every time I reflect on it, it's amazing to me. They chose other people. They didn't put their attention on themselves. They said, how can I help you? And people came from clear across the country, driving goods, food, supplies. Jim has a great story about this woman. She set up a candy stand from Ohio, all these people just trying to look out for one another. And that's something I think we cannot afford to forget.
And also Reverend Jim Martin, he also had a story about a duffel bag full of cigarettes. Tell us about that, because I felt that was so unique. And it's just like, this is definitely a only real life story you can read in a book.
Actually, yes, you're right. Someone had told me that story, and it was just any way that people could help, bringing cigarettes, bringing food, bringing anything. And I think people were so desperate to help at that time, right? You remember when you would go down to the site, you'd see people on the side of the road just clapping, and people wanted to donate anything, water bottles. And Damon mentioned the story of the woman, who came from Ohio, who I met, who set up a little candy stand and just was giving out candy. And she was this grandmother who had driven from Ohio. So, it's all about people choosing, right? In those difficult times, people have a choice. They can choose to withdraw, or they can choose to really, do what they can. And I think that's the key thing, doing what they can. It's all about choice.
I want to mention here that Father Martin has a new book coming out called Come Forth, The Promise of Jesus' Greatest Miracle. And it's about the story of Lazarus. And the story of Lazarus is that Jesus, you don't have to be a Christian to appreciate this. Mm-hmm. Jesus comes and he calls to Lazarus, who is passed, and he says, come up, resurrect yourself, believe. And that would be remarkable in itself from any perspective. But as Father Martin writes, Lazarus has to make the choice of whether he's going to come out of the tomb. Lazarus has to make the choice about whether he wants to leave the darkness and go into the light. And I think that's what he was just talking about right now. And it's certainly what I found time and time again. We have choices to make in life. And 9/11 certainly brought that home. The tragedy, undeniable. The loss, undeniable. But what do we choose to do with it? How do we choose to live? How do we choose to move forward, and in what way? Who are we going to choose to be? On this day, the 22nd anniversary of 9/11, and every day, I reflect on this. It's what people taught me as I wrote this book.
Man, true, amazing guests today, Damon DiMarco and Reverend Jim Martin, the author of Tower Stories and Oral History of 9/11. First and foremost, I want to say thank you both for what you worked on. It doesn't do justice for the time I have to talk about this, but I want to make one last comment. The photographers that you feature in the book to showcase what they also capture, I felt that was a very moving experience and made the words even come more into life.
They did a great job, didn't they?
Yes, sir. So once again, I want to thank you both for taking time to talk to us about this important part of our history.
Yeah, thank you for having us on.
Thank you very much.